I was inside pacing, peering out our kitchen window. Shoppers were picking up stuff, picking through our stuff. Kids were moping that they had to be outside all morning. And Heather and my in-laws were talking to shoppers and neighbors, and I couldn't go out. Days before, we were clearing out the farm, getting rid of junk. Heather drugged me outside to help. Farm supplies, tools, tangles of drip irrigation and electric fence netting, half-finished perimeter fence, wire, piles of farm trash. The mania had ended. The depression that followed had been building for months, slowly creeping up on me. I had dreaded its return since after my 9-month battle with depression in 2024. So riding in shotgun with Dad in his Silverado on our second trip to the dump, he said to me, "Buddy, it's time for us to take you to the hospital. And I know you don't want to go, but I don't want my grandkids to lose their dad." So Heather called Kyle, and I sat on the porch with him, looking out over our flower field and getting covered up by the weeds. He'd preached recently about his own hospital stay and called it his grippy sock vacation. I agreed to let Heather and Dad drive me to Birmingham. So we parked, walked over to UAB, and they waited for me in the ER for 6 hours. The psychiatrist asked if I wanted to be admitted to the residential program. "I do not," I said. So I left with a spring in my step. The next day I called Dad to take me back. I was in the psych center for 10 days. I told people and myself that it had been there, or that I had been there for 3 weeks. I was sure of it until I checked my journal. I found it in my bedside drawer, a cheap little brown notebook with lined paper. I wrote with a golf pencil they gave me. Apparently those were less dangerous than a full-length pencil. Sterile hospital air, the Indian girl that was kind, also bipolar. The carrot cake was awesome. I learned from the others that you had to write it on the meal card every day. And even though they occasionally got the meals wrong. The ones desperate to leave, yelling and crying on the phone, I remember them. The schizophrenic guy talking to imaginary people in the public room, the group room. The ones alone in their rooms, down the hall laughing and carrying on full-out conversations. I remember all of them. I journaled to myself. I used to be a runner. I used to strength train, bike to work, and write sermons every week and deliver them. Now I'm feeling trapped, walking in circles. The shower, dribbling water, huddling in the corner to get wet. The yoga mat, calling to me, snack time. Peanut butter crackers, Oreos, stepping out at 1 a.m. for sleep meds and peanut butter cracker snacks. A couple of mornings a week, they brought us individually into Dr. Badia's office. She was in the center of the room, a large window to the hospital courtyard behind her. Sunlight falling through, surrounded by 3 training psychiatrists and the social worker. Big table in a small little room, looking in her eyes across the table. She said, "It sounds like you've tried a lot of different medications. That's bad practice, cycling through them before reaching the maximum therapeutic effect." She was talking about my psychiatrist that I'd been working with for 2 years by that point. So I'm totally confused. I didn't know who to believe. I read a book someone left behind, Butlerian Jihad, or Jihad, a late prequel in the Dune series. I talked with one of the attending psychiatrists about it, and my roommate, we'll call him Pete, who had read some of the series too. I couldn't read it when I got home, even though I got Mom to bring me a copy of the original, first book in the series. While in the psych ward, after I finished the Butlerian Jihad novel. Heather took every one of my calls while I was in there. She started her new job at the museum while I was in there. all the while packing boxes to move, selling furniture on Facebook Marketplace, homeschooling the kids. She visited me 3 times while I was in there in my 10 days. Once just to see me, once for the notary, house closure papers, and getting my signature. Walking out of the ward with Heather and the social worker to meet the notary, I felt like freedom. And the 3rd time she had to visit because the notary had taken the day off, so we had to reschedule and hire a mobile notary. We quietly signed the papers and stamped our thumbs. On the visits, we sat within earshot of the staff, the main room where we spent all our time eating and playing cards and dominoes, watching TV. We talked quietly. The time limit was 30 minutes. Others who didn't have a visitor had to stay in their rooms for quiet time. I remember lining up to go to group therapy twice a day. I hated it. It felt like a huge waste of time, but I wanted to at least say that I'd tried, you know. Most of the techs were kind. One, I barely remember her name. I think it was we'll call her Martha. Sit up so I can take your temperature. Lift up your arm. Open your mouth. She even criticized me for drinking too much water. I couldn't stand her. She made me so mad. Sam, a woman with a hijab, she took me to a quiet room and she asked questions. She was a therapist. You had to move as a child because of choices that your family made, and now the same thing you've worked so hard to avoid is happening to you and your family. She's helped me realize this is a major trigger for me. The thought of losing the farm is triggering my depression. That had never occurred to me, so that connection. So I'm not really sure it helped, but something in it rang true than any other BS I'd heard that week. We went to the gym a couple times. I played badminton with the other residents, some in their hospital gowns. I walked on a treadmill watching The Office. It made me sore because I've been so sedentary. A few days later in the same gym, the staff hosted a fall festival for the residents, the patients. They dressed up as farmers, aliens, superheroes. The residents were walking around to make crafts, play games, collect candy. I sat in a corner doodling. Curvy lines, each one outlining the last. It was actually a Neurographica, an exercise Jason taught me when I was working at the church. Someone leaned over and said it was cool. I was sitting in my bed later journaling. I remembered their births. Hannah, Noah, Soren, Sage. The years before, we were walking in Glenwood Avenue with our friends and their kids on Halloween, among thousands of others, drinking spiked cider in my Yeti mug. Kids running around, bags gripped tightly, homeowners at their doorsteps handing out fistfuls of candy. Admiring the neighborhood's gigantic werewolves and vampires and spiderwebs. That's what I was doing last Halloween. Now I'm in the hospital, missing Halloween with my kids. After the first week, I was ready to play the game. Yeah, I'm feeling a little better. I'm not having suicidal thoughts anymore. That's what I told the psychiatrist, Dr. Badia. And so a few days later, I was stuffing my bags, clothes, journal, tacky crafts that we'd made in group therapy. My book, toiletries. Pete, my roommate, said, You've been great, man. You've been a great roommate. Best I've ever had. He'd been there several times. I thought it was kind of a bummer. He'd been there 3 weeks before me. Still waiting on his family to sort out where he could stay when he got out. He said to me, we're not supposed to do this, but I could give you my number if you want. It'd be nice to stay in touch. So he jotted it down on a scrap of paper and I crammed it in my pocket in a hurry. And then I lost it a few days later. When I got out, I lived in my parents' camper for a month. Heather and the kids lived with her parents. A few weeks later, Dad parked the camper at Michael Tucker Park while I was out and parked it in Anniston so I could help drive the kids back and forth to the tech rehearsals for the cast show they were in. They were doing Annie, Little Orphan Annie. We had a microwave Thanksgiving. Chicken nuggets and Chick-fil-A sauce and veggies. We played foxtail toss, that game. And you throw the tennis ball that's got a tail on it. I taught him to play Texas Hold'em poker, the game I'd learned in the hospital, or at least remembered to play. It was good to be together. After Thanksgiving, the power in the water for the trailer on Little John Road was finally turned on. And so we moved in, and I got back to applying for jobs. We spent Christmas there, our first in the trailer. It wasn't actually as horrible as I'd imagined. So this week, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now, I met Kyle for coffee. My friend, he was the associate pastor at the church after I left. I told him I've been angry with him. Yeah, he'd asked me, were you angry with me? It's like, yeah. He laughed. I reminded him, it's like, you called it a grippy sock vacation. That was not my experience. I knew it wouldn't be, but I said, now at least I have a story. A lot of people in there had been patients multiple times. I was kind of surprised by that. And Kyle was like, oh yeah, there were. And then he says, did you have the guy that ate oatmeal with his hands? Lifted his cup hand to his face. No, my best story was the badminton one. I'm playing badminton with people in their hospital gowns. Heather asked me that evening if I thought it was good for me, being in the hospital. In hindsight, I said, yeah, it was and it wasn't. Heather said, I needed you to be gone. I couldn't take any more. You were fighting me at every turn. I couldn't do it. The walk-in cooler that we had there at the farm, the renovated workshop with a sink and the tables for floral arranging, the dahlias, the peonies hitting their third year prime. We had planted them 3 years ago and they were just starting to produce. The Ladiga Trail kiosk that we built, the Anniston Star articles that were written about us, Mayor Sierra Smith from Anniston visiting the farm, sharing the vision with us, our equipment and my tools, all of it, gone. And so we sat there at our table in the front yard of the trailer for a while, under the tree. The shadows of the sweet gum were leaning across the yard.